Now, if you've been watching hip-hop over the last decade, you probably noticed something interesting. A lot of the artists from that class are still relevant today. And not just relevant, some of them are still dominating the charts. Now, normally, when XXL releases their freshman list, it's kind of a gamble. Some of the artists end up becoming superstars, but a lot of them disappear after a few years. Every XXL class has a few names that make you go, wait, whatever happened to that guy? But the 2016 class, that one aged differently. Because when you look back at that list today, it included artists who would go on to shape the entire sound of modern hip-hop. We're talking about artists like 21 Savage, Lil Uzi Vert, Kodak Black, and Denzel Curry. And the crazy part is that when XXL first revealed that list back in 2016, a lot of people were actually clowning it. People were saying the new generation of rappers sounded weird. They said the music was too melodic, too experimental, too different from the hip-hop that came before it. But fast forward almost 10 years later, and a lot of those same artists are still here. Still dropping music, still touring, still influencing the next wave of rappers. So today we're going to break down the entire 2016 XXL freshman class and talk about what happened to each artist. Who became a superstar, who stayed consistent, and who quietly disappeared from the spotlight. But before we start going through the list, I want to know something from you. What's the best XXL freshman class of all time? Is it the 2010 class with J. Cole and Big Sean, the 2013 class with Travis Scott, or do you think the 2016 class actually ended up being the strongest? Drop it in the comments. Because once we start breaking down the names from this class, you might realize just how crazy that lineup really was. Let's start with one of the biggest artists to come out of that group, 21 Savage. Now, when 21 Savage first appeared on the XXL freshman list, he was still pretty early in his career. At the time, he had buzz in Atlanta and a few popular records circulating online, but nobody could have predicted how big he was about to become. What made 21 Savage stand out was his delivery. Calm, cold, almost emotionless. While other rappers were experimenting with melodic flows and energetic performances, 21 Savage sounded like he was barely raising his voice. But that quiet delivery somehow made his lyrics feel even more dangerous. And as his career progressed, 21 Savage evolved from a street rapper into one of the most consistent artists in hip-hop. Albums like Savage Mode, I Am Greater Than I Was, and his collaborations with Drake helped push him into the mainstream spotlight. Today, he's not just a rapper, he's one of the biggest names in modern hip-hop, which is crazy when you think about the fact that he was once just one of the names on a freshman list people were doubting. But he wasn't the only future superstar in that class, because another artist from the 2016 XXL cover would go on to become one of the most influential rappers of his entire generation, Lil Uzi Vert. But the story of the 2016 XXL class really gets interesting when you start talking about Lil Uzi Vert. Because back in 2016, not everyone believed in Uzi. In fact, one of the most viral moments from that time involved Hot 97 radio host Ebro. During an interview, Uzi was asked to rap over a classic Kanye West beat, and Uzi basically said he didn't want to do it. Now that might not sound like a big deal today, but at the time it sparked a huge debate in hip-hop. A lot of people from the older generation felt like the new wave of rappers didn't respect hip-hop tradition, and Ebro wasn't feeling Uzi's response at all. He basically went on air and said that artists like Uzi were going to fall off because they didn't understand the culture the same way the previous generation did. At the time, that prediction sounded reasonable to a lot of people, because Uzi represented something completely different. His music blended rap with punk energy, melodic singing, and emotional vulnerability. He didn't look like the typical rapper. He didn't move like the typical rapper, and he definitely didn't sound like the typical rapper. But here's where the story gets crazy. Fast forward almost 10 years later, and the outcome ended up being the complete opposite of what people expected. Lil Uzi Vert didn't fall off. He became one of the biggest artists of his entire generation. Songs like XO Tour Live 3 helped redefine what mainstream rap could sound like. His album Eternal Atake became one of the most anticipated releases of the streaming era, and his influence helped shape an entire wave of melodic trap artists that followed. And in one of the most ironic twists in hip-hop history, in 2026, Lil Uzi Vert currently has the #1 rap song in the country with What You Saying. Meanwhile, the same Ebro who predicted Uzi would fall off is no longer even working at Hot 97, which just goes to show something about hip-hop. The new generation always gets doubted until they end up running the entire industry, and Lil Uzi Vert is probably the best example of that from the entire 2016 XXL freshman class. Now, if you're enjoying the breakdown so far, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because we're about to talk about another artist from this class who built one of the most unpredictable careers in modern hip-hop, Kodak Black. Now, Kodak Black might actually have one of the most unpredictable careers out of the entire 2016 XXL freshman class. Because from the moment Kodak stepped into the spotlight, controversy followed him everywhere. But at the same time, so did the music. Kodak first started building serious buzz with songs like No Flockin', which quickly became a street anthem and introduced the world to his unmistakable voice and delivery. His style felt raw, emotional, and completely unfiltered. Kodak wasn't trying to sound polished, he sounded real, and that authenticity made fans connect with him immediately. But Kodak's career has always been a roller coaster. Huge hits, legal troubles, moments where people thought his career might completely collapse. And yet every time it looked like things were over for Kodak, something would happen that pulled him right back into the spotlight. One of the most unbelievable moments in his story came in 2021. Kodak Black was facing serious legal issues and was serving time in federal prison. A lot of people assumed his career might be finished for good, but then something happened that nobody saw coming. On his final day in office, President Donald Trump granted Kodak Black a presidential pardon. Just like that, Kodak was free, and the internet exploded. The pardon became one of the most talked about moments in hip-hop news that year. Some people celebrated it, others debated it, but one thing was clear: Kodak Black had once again found himself at the center of the cultural conversation. And once he returned to music, he did exactly what he always does. He dropped more records, more features, more moments that kept his name circulating in hip-hop. That's the thing about Kodak. No matter how chaotic the story gets, he always finds a way back into the spotlight. And almost 10 years after that 2016 XXL cover, Kodak Black is still one of the most recognizable artists from that class, which is honestly impressive when you consider how many ups and downs his career has had. Anderson .Paak. Now Anderson .Paak might actually be one of the most versatile musicians to ever appear on an XXL freshman cover. While most artists on the list were focused on trap music, Anderson .Paak was blending hip-hop with funk, soul, and R&B in a way that felt completely unique. At the time, some people were confused about why he was even on the XXL list, but looking back today, his career speaks for itself. Anderson .Paak went on to win multiple Grammy Awards, collaborate with some of the biggest artists in the world, and even form the duo Silk Sonic with Bruno Mars, which just proves something interesting about that 2016 class. It wasn't just influential, it was diverse. You had street rappers, melodic innovators, experimental artists, and even musicians who blurred the lines between genres. Another artist who deserves recognition from that class is Denzel Curry. Now, Denzel Curry might not always dominate the charts the same way some of the other names do, but when it comes to respect in the hip-hop community, his reputation is incredibly strong. Denzel built his career on lyrical ability, powerful performances, and projects that push creative boundaries. Albums like Taboo and Melt My Eyes, See Your Future showed that he wasn't afraid to evolve artistically while still maintaining the aggressive energy that made fans gravitate toward him early on. And over the years, Denzel Curry has become one of the most respected artists from that entire XXL lineup. Then there's G Herbo. Now, G Herbo represents something really important when we talk about the 2016 XXL freshman class: longevity. Herbo came out of Chicago during one of the most intense periods in the city's rap history. The drill scene had already exploded with artists like Chief Keef and Lil Durk, but Herbo carved out his own lane with gritty storytelling and raw authenticity. From the beginning, his music felt different. Instead of relying purely on catchy hooks or club records, Herbo leaned heavily into storytelling. His lyrics sounded like journal entries from the streets of Chicago, real experiences, real trauma, real life, and that honesty built him one of the most loyal fan bases in hip-hop. But the moment that really showed Herbo's staying power came years later. Fast forward to 2025. By this point, Lil Durk had become one of the biggest voices representing Chicago rap. But when Durk ended up facing legal issues and the spotlight shifted, somebody had to carry the torch for the city, and G Herbo stepped right into that role. His record Went Legit became one of the biggest street anthems of the year, and suddenly Herbo was everywhere again. The song reminded people exactly why he had lasted so long in the industry. But it wasn't just that one record. Throughout 2025, G Herbo was one of the most in-demand features in hip-hop. Artists from all over the country were calling him for verses because they knew exactly what he brought to a track: energy, authenticity, and that gritty Chicago delivery that fans love. Some of the hardest features of that entire year had G Herbo on them, and it prove something important. Almost 10 years after the 2016 XXL cover, G Herbo was still a major voice in the culture. And that's not something you can say about every freshman class artist. Because a lot of rappers come into the game hot, but fade out just as quickly. Herbo didn't. He adapted. He survived different eras of hip-hop, and he kept evolving while staying true to the sound that made people respect him in the first place. Which is exactly why the 2016 XXL class continues to age so well, and that's really the key word when we talk about the 2016 XXL freshman class: longevity. Because when you compare that class to many of the ones that came before it, something becomes very clear. A lot of these artists are still here, still dropping music, still touring, still influencing the next generation. Now, if you've made it this far in the video, I want to ask you something. Do you think the 2016 XXL freshman class is the greatest freshman class ever? Because when you look at the impact of artists like 21 Savage, Lil Uzi Vert, Kodak Black, and Denzel Curry, it's hard to argue that this class didn't shape the sound of modern hip-hop, but at the same time, some people still believe earlier classes had stronger lineups. The 2010 class had J. Cole and Big Sean. The 2013 class introduced Travis Scott, so the debate is still open, but one thing is undeniable. The 2016 XXL freshman class didn't fall off the way a lot of people predicted. In fact, many of those artists are still running the rap game today, and that's something nobody expected back when that cover first dropped. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to Fake Famous because we've got a lot more deep dives coming. Rap beef breakdowns, album explainers, and stories about the artists that shaped hip-hop culture. And trust me, some of those stories get way crazier than this one. I'll see you in the next video.